So the other thing I wanted to touch on was seed storage. So a lot of people, you know, when you buy seeds, they're in a little paper envelope. That's perfectly fine. All seeds have different kind of windows of viability. So every different seed will last for a different number of years before you start to lose your germination success. So I like to use beans as an example because they last forever. Beans are good for like 10 years after you save the seeds. So it takes 10 years before you start to get a reduced germination rate from beans. Peas are usually about 5 years, and then the general rule of thumb after that is about 3 years. So that doesn't mean that if you saved some radish seeds that in 3 years none of them will grow. It means that in 3 years maybe 80% will grow. And then in year 4 maybe only 70% will grow, and so on and so on. So storing your seeds properly is very important, and knowing when you planted or when you save seeds is very important. So label everything twice, like just label everything. I like to use a good Sharpie marker, a good permanent marker, because it won't fade. It'll stay on there. I store my seeds personally in little, they're called like watchmaker's tins. They're like little metal tins with a clear lid. You can buy them. I get mine from David's Tea when they have the little samples, and all my friends save them for me. But you can use, envelopes are perfectly fine, glass jars are perfectly fine. Some people like to save their seeds in the freezer or in the fridge. I personally don't do that because some, like, depending on what you're saving, it can shorten your viability window. It can, like, some things can't handle that cold period. So I personally don't. I like to keep my seeds, I store them the way I store my potatoes. So somewhere cool, dry, and dark with enough room to breathe, because those little tiny seeds, inside that seed there is an embryo and there is a tiny little plant, and it does need to breathe. So don't vacuum seal them, don't stuff them in the freezer, put them in a breathable envelope or a glass jar with some air. They don't breathe very much, but they do breathe. So, yes?
I had a tackle box that I repurposed for seeds.
Yeah.
Does it matter that they're breathing the same air, like different species?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, that should be perfectly fine. And as long as you keep them somewhere cool and dry, they should be fine. Check your seeds regularly. You don't, like, you know, if they're broken, they're not going to germinate. If they're moldy, they probably won't germinate. So check them, visit them. I talk to them, you know, just check them regularly, do a regular inventory, and rotate your seeds. So if you have it labeled, like, you know, I saved these beans in 2019 and I saved these ones in 2020, well, I'm going to plant the ones that I saved in 2019 first so I can refresh that crop. I have a spreadsheet for this garden of what needs to be saved when, so we have seeds for the following years and what we're running out of and how long things take and when I last saved them. So highly recommend a spreadsheet, but unless you're looking after 101 raised beds, you might not need that intense of a system.
Do you dry them at all? Like,
yes. Yes. So we'll get into the whole processing a little bit more in the fall workshop, but there are different steps for actually preparing the seed itself. So the peas and beans that you dried on the vine that are already nice and dry, those don't usually need much more work. You can crack open the pod and they're good to go. Things like tomatoes that had to be fermented will need to be rinsed and dried. I personally don't use a dehydrator. I find that's too warm and it can dry them too quickly, and then you get some that are like cooked on the outside edges. I just leave them at room temperature. My go-to method is a paper towel or a cloth napkin on a plate. Sprinkle them, let them dry, and just like slough them off once they're dry. But you do want to wipe off or rinse off as much of the soft tissue as you can, because if that doesn't dry properly, it can rot. And then you get rotten seeds, and nobody wants rotten seeds. Another thing I had to remind a gardener of, because she mistakenly was told her cooking class, she took a squash and she was saying, like, hey, it's really easy to peel a squash if you microwave it first and then cut it open, which is great, but those seeds are now microwaved, they're dead, they're not going to grow. And she, like, it just never occurred to her. So I was like, well, actually, because she said, oh, and you can save these seeds and plant them. I was like, actually, you fried those ones, so we cannot But if you had cut them open first and taken the seeds out, then you can save them. So don't microwave your seeds. There's a lot of people do different things for like pre-germinating. So some people will soak their seeds before they plant them. Some people will do a germination test. So if you are, like if you have some old seeds or somebody gave you seeds, you got seeds from a seed swap and you don't know like if they're viable, you can take 10 seeds and put them in a damp paper towel and put that damp paper towel in a Ziploc baggie and stick it to a window. And then in a few days, they should have sprouted, and you can calculate how many out of 10 or which percentage sprouted. So you know, like, okay, these only have a 50% germination rate, so I'm going to plant twice as many as I need for that season. So you can kind of do your seed math that way. Some people do like to pre-soak. So if you're planting peas or beans, you can soak them overnight before you plant them. You get a bit of a faster germination that way. I don't bother doing that because that's an extra step that I don't have time for. I don't mind waiting an extra day for my beans and peas, but some people love doing it, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Yeah, and then, so that's kind of the general overview of like how you're storing them. Another thing that I see all the time is I see it in those stupid videos that come up on Facebook, and it's like, oh, I just saved this avocado seed, or I saved these papaya seeds, and look, now I have 1 million papayas. And it's like, you need to think critically about what grows in this climate and what does not. Sure, you can sprout an avocado pit and have an avocado tree, but it will probably never give you avocados because we live in Canada and unfortunately we can't grow avocados here. Will you get a cool house plant? Absolutely. Will it stop you from ever having to buy avocados again? No. I also like to tell people, like, you absolutely can save seeds from the veggies in the grocery store, but unless it's an apple, they don't tell you what the variety is. So a bell pepper in the grocery store is probably a California Wonder bell pepper, but you don't know for sure. So you can try, there's no harm in trying, but there's also a good chance that it's a hybrid, so nothing might happen. And I always, like, especially with new gardeners, I tell them to, like, save seeds from plants that someone you trust gave you, because I don't want my gardeners thinking that they've done something wrong when really they're just trying to save seeds from a hybrid and it's not their fault, but then they get discouraged and they don't want to try again. So I always like to caution them about that. Another thing is there's some things that we don't save seed from, and for good reason. So potatoes, for example. When you grow potatoes, you're planting a potato and you're cloning a potato. Because when we domesticated potatoes, there is so much variation in the seed that if you save the seeds from a potato, like if you grow a potato plant, it will make a flower and make little berries. Those berries are toxic. You do not want to eat them. But if you saved seeds from those, you might get a lovely potato plant, but it might not make potatoes. You might just have greens and flowers and something that looks nothing like what you would think, because we've been cloning those potatoes for so long that that's what we want. We want the potato. We don't want some crazy looking plant with pretty flowers that's technically a potato, but we can't eat it. So that's why when we grow potatoes, we grow them from what's called seed potatoes. They're just other potatoes. Seed potatoes, if you purchase them and they say seed potato on the bag, that means that they've been cloned again and again. I think it's 4 generations in a sterile environment to prevent potato blight is the big thing we're worried about. That's why they won't let you bring potatoes onto PEI or off of PEI. You could destroy the entire potato economy, so we're not going to do that. So when you buy seed potatoes, when it says seed potato, that's what it means, is that they've grown potatoes, saved them, grown them again for 4 generations or more in a sterile environment, usually from a tissue sample that was grown like in a petri dish. It's very cool the way it's done, but you can just take any old potato that you've grown at home or that you got from the grocery store, plant it, it will grow. It'll grow the same kind as what you planted. It's just you're not guaranteed that there's no potato blight or potato fungus or any other nasty things in there. but you're probably fine. I think that is everything I know off the top of my head about seed saving, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yes?
Will a hybrid sprout and just not produce fruit or babies, or will it not sprout at all?
It depends.
Okay.
It depends on the hybrid. Some hybrids are completely sterile, so their seeds won't do anything.
Okay.
And sometimes they will grow they'll grow, but they won't grow what you planted. They'll grow one of the two parents of what you planted.
Okay.
So, and there's unfortunately no way to tell until you try. Unless you've got like a genome sequencing kit at home, in which case I'd love to borrow it.
In a chunk, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, we gotta have questions. We got like a whole half hour left.
What do you think I should get started with the kids, like as an intro to seed saving?
Beans and peas. Super easy. The seeds are big, easy for tiny hands to handle. Lots of different colors, lots of different shapes. Kids love them.
I've got a bean on our windowsill in the kitchen that's about 3 feet tall already.
Oh, beautiful.
You know what kind it is?
Nope.
Guys,
That's okay. One of my, she's my second smallest gardener now. My smallest one was born like a week ago. But my second smallest gardener, Amelia, when I first met her, she was 2 and wearing a pink onesie and head to toe just black with dirt, like filthy. And she's in her stroller with her mom and she just opens her hands. She goes, seeds! And she's got fistfuls of dried beans. And it was the cutest thing I've ever seen. So, yeah, exactly. So, beans and peas are great for kids. It's easy for them to understand because it's something that they see. It's the part that they eat. And they're nice big seeds, easy to handle, all sorts of different colors, and they grow quickly. So there's a lot of that, like, instant gratification. So, yeah, fantastic.
Do you have any thoughts or advice on saving seeds from like wildflowers?
Wildflowers. Wildflowers, like flowers in general.
Or,
Yeah, they're pretty easy actually. So they do a very good, as they're wild, they do a very good job of pollinating on their own. Most of them are self-pollinating. So it's not like you're gonna, save seeds from a daisy and get like a geranium, So most of the time in the fall, you'll see where the flowers have dried up and shriveled up and dried. That's where the seeds are. So a lot of my gardeners just snip the whole flower head and put it in a little jar or a Ziploc bag, let it dry out. And in the spring, you can just kind of crush it up and sprinkle them, and they will generally grow. Other things like, say, milkweed. We've got a bunch of milkweed out front. We've got, I was looking at my peony at home. They make these big, nice pods, and you can just open them up and find the seeds. But the best thing to do is wait until they dry naturally on the plant in the fall, because if you take them too early, they can't continue to mature once you remove them from the plant, right? So, what I do is if I'm out walking around town and I'm just like, I see that, like, that's a nice peony over there. I'm gonna come back in the fall and get a better look.
That's what I've been doing.
Yes, exactly. I do the same thing. I think most gardeners do. Just kind of make a mental note and come back in the fall. You want to come on like a nice dry day, because if it's a fall day that's just rained, everything's going to be squishy and wet.
Yeah.
But once it's like dry and crispy to the touch, that's typically when it's ready. Yep. Any more questions?
About grains.
Greens?
Grains.
Grains. Ooh, that's a good one. So grains, you save them. Typically, they're pretty straightforward because they will. Now, in terms of like cross-pollinating with grains and that sort of thing, that is not my area of expertise. I know corn is really infamous for cross-pollinating, but if I were trying to do it, like if I were saving, say, buckwheat at home, I would do it the exact same way as what I did with the tomatoes. I'd put a little drawstring bag, like when the grass produces that seed cluster, I would put a drawstring bag over it, and the pollen is so small that it would probably just...
So it's self-pollinate.
Yeah, it would self-pollinate, I would think. And once it's dry, and like if you picture a wheat field with all that dry grain, we harvest it at the mature state to eat it. So you can literally just save what you were going to eat. Like if you go to the bulk barn and you buy like wheat, like oat groats or wheat berries or buckwheat, those will grow because the state that we eat them in is also the state that the seed is ready to grow in. So another great tip is beans and lentils, chickpeas, all of that from the bulk barn. Just scoop them and plant them because they will still grow, because generally, like beans, legumes, and most grains and peas, the state that we eat them in is the state that, like the dry soup kind, the state that we eat them in is the state that they're ready to plant in. So you can go get like whole dry peas at the bulk barn and plant them. The split ones, no, but the whole ones, absolutely. We did chickpeas a couple years ago from just dry bulk barn chickpeas. Obviously, we don't know the variety because they don't label them, but it's still a really cool experiment. And we've done buckwheat the same way as well. And I grow I sprout oat groats at home for my cockatiel, and he loves them. So, yeah, grains definitely same thing. Any more questions?
I have a tomato plant question. It's
Okay.
not about the seed, but it's my first year growing tomatoes.
Okay.
They're very tall with not a lot of leaves.
Not a lot of bushiness.
Yeah.
So are they like kind of spindly?
Yes.
They might be lacking in nitrogen.
That's what I thought. So
Yeah.
I've been amending that. Okay.
Yeah. So are you amending with like compost?
Coffee,
Mhm.
compost, like food,
Like plant food?
plant food.
Yeah.
Like that.
So a good high nitrogen plant food should help, because the compost and the thing with compost and putting like coffee and other things like that straight into the soil with your plant, they have a lot of nitrogen in them, but breaking them down, the bacteria use all the nitrogen, so the plant can't have it.
Okay.
So when your coffee and your compost is breaking down in your soil, all that available nitrogen is being taken up by the bacteria that are breaking it down and
Yeah.
transforming it into a form that the plant can use.
Yeah.
Whereas if you use a liquid plant food, it's ready to go.
Yeah.
So I would do both.
Yeah.
So you've got the compost that'll be ready for later, and the liquid fertilizer that's ready for now.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, but if they're lacking the bushiness, I would say it's probably a nitrogen issue, because nitrogen's the main responsibly for vegetative growth. So, yeah, no problem. Yes.
We're ready to plant some seeds. We've got some little like circle pods.
Yeah.
That are ready, like for maybe 50 seeds. Do you think that peas would make sense to put in there?
In those little, like, what are they called? Those like peat moss thingies. Peas, I put them directly in the ground, because they germinate so quickly, and they'll take up that little space so fast that it's not really even worth your time to plant each one. Are you planning on putting them outside or in a pot, or?
I would like to use those little peat moss circles.
Yeah.
Have them outside on like a little bookshelf on the patio.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what to get started with. We don't have a lot of outdoor space to plant afterwards.
Yeah, what I would use those little pods for is leafy greens. So you can do lettuce, kale, anything like that, because they stay small for quite a lot longer, and then you can harvest them and eat them at any stage, really. So you could have them in those little pods and have like each little pod have a little lettuce plant about that big, and then you can just snip them off and eat them. But for your peas, I'd put them straight into any container or patch of soil or wherever you're going to plant them. Any more questions?
Lettuce.
Yes. So lettuce is, yeah, lettuce is great because it is pretty well self-pollinating, and it goes to seed super easy, and it does so in its first year. So lettuce, just leave one plant alone, plant it one or two, put them maybe somewhere they get some extra sun, because they will bolt and go to seed faster if it's hot out. I only grow my lettuce for harvesting for the food bank in the spring and the fall, because in the summer it's so hot out here that it all bolts. But I let some bolt on purpose this year for seeds. So what it's going to do is it's going to make these flowers, they look almost like a dandelion. They get the little white fluffy things on the end of the seed. So once those flowers come up and they start to dry, you just put your little organza bag over them so you don't lose them, snip off the flower stalk, and you can hang it upside down and shake it, and all your little seeds come out. Or I'll shake it in a bucket or in a paper bag and catch all those seeds, and then you can kind of just blow off the white fluffy stuff, and you'll have your little seeds left behind.
So can you do that for dill, for example? Same, like when it
Yes.
bolts, and what else? Spinach.
Yep.
Like, yeah.
Yep. Most of those are really good at self-pollinating, but yeah, when it bolts, just use that to your advantage
Yeah.
and save the seed. Absolutely. Because especially we get that problem out here a lot because we have a few gardeners that they're hesitant to plant until after last frost. But after last frost, it gets really hot out here really quick. So all their leafy greens go to seed so quickly and they get so disappointed. But I'm like, well, you just have more seed for next year. So, and most of those things are really good at self-pollinating. So you shouldn't need to worry too much about, you know, different varieties unless you're growing like 6 varieties of spinach or lettuce all at once, right side by side, then you're probably fine to just save the seed. If you are, like I know people who do that, then just use your little organza bags to stop the cross-pollination and use your little toothbrush. I have it's like just a dollar store electric toothbrush, and it's my pollen toothbrush, and that stays separate from my actual toothbrush, and that's just for pollinating. It depends. So there's some annuals and some are biennial. So lettuce is an annual, so it'll die. It's done in the fall when it dies. Spinach will also die in the fall, but things like kale and collards and most brassicas they'll die back, and as long as it's not too freezing cold and as long as they've got some protection, I usually just do a layer of mulch. So when the plant dies down in the fall, I'll just mulch it really well, or in this case we put them in the greenhouse, or you can dig it up and bring it inside. And it'll look very dead, but in the spring it will come back. One of my gardeners over in Bucks, I think he's 63, has a kale plant that he's had for like 4 years because I was going to throw it out, and he's like, no, don't throw it out. So he planted it in a pot and he brought it home, and it's like 4 years old now, and it's still making kale, but now it's making seeds mostly. So, but more kale seeds. So, we finally got to go home to Nova Scotia for the first time in a long time 2 weeks ago, and my in-laws are like, what is this thing in our garden? And they're like, it looks like something from the Addams Family because it's like this tall, and I thought it was a tree because it's about this tall, and it's just covered in these little, they look like bean pods. And I was like, what on earth is that? And I get a closer look, and it's kale that has just, it grew from last year. It's taller than me, and it looks like there's enough kale there to supply like all of the Lunenburg area with kale seeds forever. So it's cool because they make these big, crazy-looking plants that look nothing like what you'd expect, and it just kind of goes to show you how what nature's intentions are versus what our intentions are with our vegetables. Like, we want to eat them when they taste good, and they want to make seeds. So, yeah, it's very interesting. I think you had a question.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
My first one, when you use the toothbrush to pollinate, how do you wash the toothbrush afterwards?
That's a very good question. What I do is, if I'm doing a whole bunch of tomatoes of different varieties all at once, I'll use Q-tips instead, and I'll just do one and then compost it and then do the next one. If I'm doing I'll do my one variety of peppers and then one variety of tomatoes. Those aren't going to cross because they're completely different species. But then when I'm done, I'll just wash the toothbrush with some soap and water, let it dry. Yep, and then it's good to go.
And my second question, can you save seeds from kohlrabi?
Yeah, it's very much like a cabbage in that it will, if it's really hot, sometimes it'll make a seed head in its first year, but normally it'll overwinter and then come back. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Do we have any more questions? Berries. Okay. Berries are lovely, but they are so slow to grow them from seed. So what I like to do, if somebody wants to add berries to their, like raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, whatever, to their garden, I just tell them to do it the way that nature does it. Most of the berries that you see growing in, like if you see a big berry patch of like blackberries out in the woods, that's not like individual little seeds that have grown. That's one plant that's spreading under the ground and sending up shoots. So what I typically tell people to do is to take runners. So our strawberries here in the spring put out little vines, and each vine has a tiny little strawberry plant on the end that as soon as it touches soil is going to root and grow a new plant. Once it's rooted, you snip that little umbilical cord and move it wherever you want. With raspberries, blackberries, I say the same thing, except their runners are underground, so it's called a stolon that grows under the ground, and then you'll see your little shoots coming up. So if you've ever planted a raspberry cane or a blackberry cane, you'll see that like in the spring, like 4 feet away, there's these little tiny ones coming up. Well, if you take a shovel and just dig out that chunk, then you've got a whole new plant and you can move it wherever you like. And they will spread very rapidly, so you don't need to worry too much. And then blueberries, I typically take cuttings of them. So I can't remember if blueberries are first year, if they root on first year growth or second year growth. I'd have to look that up. But you can take a little snippet, like a branch off the tip, and you can use a little bit of rooting hormone on the stem and put it in some damp soil, just the same way you would clone a houseplant. And you can propagate them that way. You can save seeds from like a blueberry plant and like squish up the blueberries and rinse them off and grow the seeds, because they are ready to go at the time that the fruit is mature, but they will take a very, very long time. They're slow. It's a cool project. If you want to try it, absolutely. But for blueberries, you're better off with the cloning.
So how much of the blueberry plant?
Usually a stem, like I do, like 3 to 5 inches. And yeah, and you can just take,
So many.
yeah,
We have 10 acres and half of it is blueberries.
like low bush or high bush?
They're little.
Oh,
And
nice.
then there's different ones in the back.
Okay,
Yeah, it's like the whole community comes over and picks them.
Nice.
There's still too many, so
yeah,
it's cool.
fantastic.
I bought a freezer for blueberries.
There you go.
Yeah.
And the with the like low bush kind of like spreading, like the more wild ones that you see, those you can usually dig them up and divide them, because sometimes they'll have like multiple stems, like where the stems connect to the roots. There's usually like 3 or 4 instead of just 1, and you can just like stick a shovel down the middle and then you've got 2. So yeah. One thing that I learned this year that I'd never seen before was rhubarb seeds. A friend of mine had saved them and gave me some, and they grow the cutest little plants. And I was showing the volunteers. I was like, "What do you think these are?" And they're like, "I don't know what those are." It's baby rhubarb. And they just, if you leave your rhubarb go at the end of the season, it'll make a flower stalk. I can show you guys after we're done here our little rhubarb that's gone to flower back in our food forest. And yeah, it's just really cool. They're like these neat little, they almost look like a bleeding heart flower, like the little kind of 3D shape. Very, very cool.
I wanted me to ask you about strawberries.
Mm-hmm.
What did you want to know about strawberries? Nothing?
Nothing. What you can do is in the fall, you can come here when I'm separating out all my strawberry runners, and I can give you some strawberry runners. Yeah, very, very easy, because they just spread like crazy. So yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well,
Growing those from seed is just not worth it.
it's
or-
just like you can buy strawberry seeds at the garden centers and grow them, but they're so slow. Like, and they're so good at spreading. It just seems like a waste to try to grow them from seed when they spread. Like, it might be something to have, like if you have a seed vault or a emergency preparedness seed stash, then store some strawberry seeds in there. But generally speaking, they're so good at propagating on their own. They don't really, like, I think most of the reproducing that strawberries do from seed is like the birds eating them and then pooping them out somewhere else. Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you very much.
Very nice, thank you. Keep your eyes peeled on the Facebook page.
And if you think of questions later, I will give you my email and you guys can reach me here. If you wanted to borrow the book or any books, they are in our red tool shed, and you can sign those out to borrow. You can email me if you would like the link to the Seed Savers.